Also, there is a Poirot Mustache Origin Story in this film, believe it or not. I can't believe they went there, but they did. And welcome back to WAKA Geek Talk Radio, and today I am going to review Death on the Nile, which is one of the best titles of a murder mystery ever. Death on the Nile, it just sounds good. You know, it's a lot better than Death at the Gas Station. It is, as I hope you know, based on the Agatha Christie very popular 1937 book, Death on the Nile, which is one of her most popular novels featuring one of her most popular characters, Belgian detective Hercule Poirot. And he's often mistaken for being French, and I am often mistaken for being drunk when I am trying to do my bad French accent. Don't worry, the accent and the mustache here is not going to stay the whole video. It's probably going to be too distracting. Well, this thing moves pretty realistically, though, isn't it? Ow. Yeah, there we go. The mustache is gone. I might bring it back. We'll see when I talk about the mustache, which will be talked about. But first, now I'm going to try to do today what I consider a double review, where I talk about the movie on its own being entertaining or good, and also how does it reflect the Agatha Christie classic, the Poirot stories. Because it must be said, I am a Poirot fan. I mean, as you can see, the outfit, I'm dressed 1930s. This is an actual 1930s tie. I'm not so much dressed as Poirot, but more 30s style, because I wanted to get that flavor at least. You know, and yes, to my geek friends in the vintage clothing scene, I know that this hat does not really match the outfit, but it's the only one that I had that really feels like this style. So, and I know when you make a film based off a popular novel, there's a lot to take into consideration. I've been behind the scenes on that when I worked in development at Silver Pictures. It's because you can never make a movie version of a book exactly the same, because books and movies are different media. They have different ways of communicating, different lengths, different, you know, everything. Anyway, but the question then is the movie entertaining on its own, and does it also capture some of why the book was so great? Now, trying to judge a movie like this just on its own merits is almost impossible to do 100%, because it is based on a very popular character, almost like Sherlock Holmes, and there's got to be something, like with a Sherlock Holmes movie, that ties you to why people originally liked Sherlock Holmes. So when you have a character like Poirot, or an author like Agatha Christie, who has remained popular for decades and decades on decades, having literally hundreds, maybe thousands of her works put into film and TV, well then, and every single Poirot story has been brought to screen, TV or otherwise in some way over the years. So there's a long tradition here. So even if you make an entertaining film, you should at least make sure you don't throw away the complete spirit of the story or throw out everything that people liked about the character in the first place that made it popular. You know, otherwise, if you do that, why even make the film? And for this story specifically, there are already 2 well-done and pretty accurate movie versions of the story done. So it begs the question, when there are so many remakes and reimaginings of things these days, what, good or bad, can this movie bring new to the table? All right, now what is my general review? My general review is this movie is good, but it's not great, especially as a Agatha Christie Poirot adaptation. And my prediction, and I think I will be right about this, because I've already seen some of these reactions this past weekend, I believe the general audiences who are not as familiar with Poirot's books, movies, or shows will like this film better than the fans. And that's kind of disappointing to have to admit that, because I was looking forward to this movie. And I still liked it, but I didn't love it. And I think it's because there are some very intentional story and character choices that were made here that I don't think all fans are going to like all that much, and I felt were unnecessary to the adaptation. And I'll talk about the fan stuff really hardcore in the last 5 minutes. If you want to skip to the last 5 minutes, fans, you can, but I hope you watch the whole review. So I'm going to try to move it along. All right, so first of all, I will say, fairly forgiving to these kinds of interpretations, because I'm just kind of glad to see Poirot on the big screen again. Because I grew up with these kinds of movies. In the 70s and 80s, there was a bunch of Poirot and just general Agatha Christie movies made that I saw as a kid on Betamax back in those days and such, and VHS and on TV. where they had, these ensemble cast movie versions of these stories. So I grew up watching them. That's why I started reading Agatha Christie later. But they kind of all went by the wayside, and all that was left really was stuff on TV. And some of it, like the Agatha Christie Poirot TV show, very good. But still, it's nice to see it back on the big screen. Now, again, like I said, overall, it's good, but it's not great, partly because I like the two previous versions of this story, the previous movie versions, better. There's the 1978, where you had Peter Ustinov leading an ensemble cast, and then you have the 2004 ITV version with David Suchet as Poirot, and both versions are not only more accurate, but they're more clear in the character, the side character stories and motivations. And I also think that both actors are better at Poirot. And as you know, this movie is a sequel, in a sense, to an earlier movie that Kenneth Branagh directed and starred in, The Murder on the Orient Express, which was also a big-budget 70s Poirot tale. And in that one, in the 70s, when I felt like Albert Finney did a better job playing Poirot than Kenneth Branagh, to be quite honest. Now, I'm not going to try to do any major spoilers of the ending, but if you've already read the story or you've seen any of the TV or movie versions, you already know the general ending. Also, there is a Poirot Mustache Origin Story in this film, believe it or not. I can't believe they went there, but they did. I'll leave it up to you as to whether that's good or bad, but I will talk about that later in the review. Don't worry. Now, what's the general story if you're not familiar? The general gist is you've got beautiful Jacqueline de Belfort, played very well here by Emma Mackey, and she gets engaged to handsome, dashing, but poor Simon Doyle, played by Armie Hammer. And she makes the mistake of introducing Simon to her rich and also very beautiful friend, Lynette Ridgway, played very well here by Gal Gadot. So Simon seems to say, hey, I've got two hot women after me. I'll marry the rich one. I mean, that's just basic murder mystery economics, And he, of course, dumps Jackie and goes for Lynette. But on their honeymoon, as they travel, they do that British 1930s destination honeymoon. Oh, we're going to go to this lovely location. Then we're going to go over here and over here. Well, of course, they're stalked by the jealous Jackie at each location until it begins to drive them crazy. This is a stalker story. Agatha Christie was way ahead of the game on this one. So after getting fed up with this, Lynette and Simon talk to Poirot to see if he can help out and invite him along their wedding party as they get on this beautiful ship to go down the Nile with a cool ship full of nice rooms and luxurious bars. But you'll find out right away that Jackie's not the only person who's got a grudge against Lynette. You've got a lot of people who have grudges against her or each other. I mean, there's a lot of people with secrets. It's a right place and setting for a good old-fashioned murder. Now, one of the things that's so great about the Agatha Christie stories, is the murder mysteries, is they're kind of lighthearted and quirky in a sense, and yet there's murders going on. I felt like Kenneth Branagh here is caught between trying to make this movie entertaining for modern audiences and also telling the classic ensemble fun, if you will, murder mystery. And it's a hard, delicate balance. I'll say I sympathize with him there, but I never felt like he really found that balance either way. And even as a general audience member, I would say watching this movie, I thought the film was beautiful with a cool color scheme. But the 1937 setting there seems to get a bit, messed up by the too many digital backgrounds, digital Egyptian backgrounds, and the kind of digital drone camera shots that were noticeable to me. And it made the film feel less grounded in reality than its predecessors, who used very practical locations and sets. But then again, some would say, do you want reality in a Agatha Christie murder mystery? So how do they try to make this one different from the previous versions and better fit for modern audiences? The result is, go dark, theme-wise. And even Poirot's a bit darker. This is definitely the darkest interpretation of the story thus far. I think to make it more intense. But the result, while entertaining to a degree, I felt misses and loses the moments of mirth and quirks that make Agatha Christie's stories fun. In fact, one character dies here, I'm not going to say who doesn't die in the novel, and that kind of leaves things on a more of a downer than the previous versions. Now let's talk about Kenneth Branagh. Now, there's a lot of good performances in this film, But this movie, to me, feels more like it's made for fans of Kenneth Branagh than for fans of Poirot. And, I love Kenneth Branagh. I'm a fan of many of his works, especially Henry V, Much Ado About Nothing. And I loved him as Gilderoy Lockhart in the Harry Potter series. But here, his Poirot, it's a little bit darker than I think really Poirot should be. And he starts the film with a tragic backstory at the beginning that is not in Agatha Christie's canon for Poirot. And he's more forceful. I mean, here he holds a gun to make everybody listen to his reveal, which is out of character. And at one point, he even throws a hatchet or a butcher knife at a suspect, which is ridiculous. That's not Poirot's strength. Poirot's strength is his mind, his little gray cells. It is his powers of observation and be able to see what people are doing and an excellent memory. And those things get sidelined for a more forceful interpretation of Poirot. And as I mentioned, there's a Mustache Origin Story. Oh my gosh! Yes. Okay, they went there. Oh yes, let me get my mustache on. All right, now, okay, so there actually haven't been that many different actors to play Poirot, only a handful, and most of them have done it very well, which is great, because you cannot say the same thing with Sherlock Holmes, I don't think. Not as much. Now, notice this. Here's Albert Finney as Poirot, here is David Suchet as Poirot, and here is Peter Ustinov as Poirot. Notice something similar? They all have very tailored, perfect mustaches. Poirot is known as having a very perfectly groomed, waxed, glorious, most amazing mustache. Probably something like what the three of them are wearing, or some variation of it. Not as ridiculous as this, but in the first movie with Kenneth Branagh, he had this. Notice the difference? I mean, compared to what they have, he looks like he's got a weed of hair growing out of his face. This thing isn't well groomed. It's out of control. It's like someone took a toupee and rolled it up and just put it on his face. One of my friends called it the living ferret on his face. Yes, that's exactly what it looks like. And it's not historically accurate either. Even the big walrus mustaches and the handlebar mustaches are like, Wyatt Earp. They grow from the mouth to here, and they might go down the sides, but it's all hair from this area. The hair does not grow like weeds into the face and the cheeks. And I just have to mention that because as a fashion person and as a Poirot fan, I was like, what the freaking heck is that thing? Now, he trims it back a little bit here, as you can see. But I kind of feel like he does it hesitatingly because he has an origin story for the mustache. Now, here's a little bit of a spoiler, but it's at the very beginning of the movie, so it's not really much of a spoiler, but I'm warning you. This starts with him in a tragic scene in World War I, where he gets his face messed up around his mouth and cheek and has to grow this giant mustache to cover it up. Yes, that's what he does, for real. I was kind of like... And even that is kind of weird, because the way the scars are, you're like, well, the mustache wouldn't really grow evenly through there. Is this a toupee mustache that he stuck on over? Because that kind of heavy scarring would probably cause the hair not to grow there, at least not evenly. Anyway... Poirot was in the Belgian police force before becoming a private detective. He was not a veteran of World War I and did not have any facial scars and then he loses the love of his life and all this dark stuff that happens to kind of give you a darker, more serious, bitter Poirot with his mustache to cover this up. So I think a lot of the fans are not going to like that. I didn't like it. It's one of the things about the movie that irked me the most. And it makes me question Kenneth Branagh's commitment to telling a story about Poirot or telling a story about his own. All right, now along those lines, I'm going to talk to the fans about the accuracy of the story when it comes to some of the things they're going to notice right off the bat, besides Poirot. The side characters. Now, first of all, the main whodunit and why is intact, so don't be worried about that, thank goodness. If they changed that, I would have been pissed. But the story doesn't flow as well because a lot of the side characters' motivations and what they're after and who they even are is really mixed up. I understand why they did it. Okay, they're trying to condense things and also modernize things. But this is beyond condensing. And, when you're taking books, you have... And the other two previous Poirot... The other two previous movies of this also cut out and condensed some characters. But they did it in a way more accurate way. Here... in a way more clear way, what's going on with the characters and why. Here, it seems more like it's jumbled up to kind of keep you guessing. or jumbled up to be more modern. They have a lot of aspects that felt like they're more modernizing. Like you have a character who, this is not the case in the book, you have a character who's got a racist mom who doesn't want her son marrying a black musician, and you've got another couple of characters who turn out to be lesbians when they weren't even the same people in the story. I don't mind that modernization for audiences, I get that, but here the who does what to who and why is massively different on the side characters, and that's important because that affects the overall story. All these things weave together on this ship, and so I felt like that was something that a lot of the fans are going to notice and probably not like, and actually it unintentionally hurts the movie's flow, I felt a bit, especially when it comes to understanding who is who and why they want this or that. And I feel like a note to modern screenwriters, if you think you can rewrite Agatha Christie and improve upon her character dynamics, well, fat chance. And there's one more thing that's a big spoiler, so if you don't want to know this, turn this off. At the end of the film, Poirot shaves off his mustache. Yep, it's gone. You heard me. And that, I think to many Poirot fans and to me, is heresy. Alright, so my overall review of this was, it is good, it is not great, and as a Poirot fan, I had a lot of issues with some of the intentional choices made to the Poirot character that were completely unnecessary and in fact contrary to the spirit of Agatha Christie's character and novel, even despite telling a mostly accurate and interesting story. It's interesting. Now, I am going to do a compare and contrast of the three main versions, because I want to talk also about the clothes and other aspects that I know a lot of fans of mine who love Poirot are going to be interested in. That will be coming out very soon. In the meantime, though, I am Nathan with WAKA Geek Talk Radio, and thank you for tuning in and watching my Death on the Nile review. If you like this review or what you see and hear, please subscribe and watch other of my reviews. More coming out every day.